listener. Tonight, I invite you to take a slow breath and let the noise of the day fade away. You are safe now. You are at home. Outside, the world softens under the sound of rain, that steady rhythm that asks nothing of you. Each drop carries the weight of the day, washing it quietly into the distance. As you listen, imagine the gentle glow of a window in the city, the flicker of a candle, the hum of a piano echoing through the night air. This story is not about what happens next, but about what it feels like to simply be, to exist in a moment that asks for nothing but your presence. Let the words guide you through narrow streets and soft lamplight. Let them remind you that even in the heart of a city, peace still breathes, slow, calm, alive. Now find a comfortable place. Close your eyes if you wish, and allow yourself to drift into the quiet rhythm of a rainy night in the quiet heart of the city. The city breathes softly beneath a velvet sky, its pulse slowed by the gentle hush of rain, not the kind that thundered or tore through the streets in violent sheets, but a slow, quiet drizzle, the kind that fell like whispered secrets from the clouds above. It tapped against the window panes of small apartments and coffee shops, a rhythmic patter that blended with the occasional drip from a gutter and the soft sigh of tires on wet pavement. The neon signs flickered in delicate hues, faded pinks, blues, and golds, reflecting on the slick blacktop like scattered constellations. It was late, nearly midnight, and most of the city had curled inward, retreating to the warmth of their homes or slipping into dreams. But in a quiet corner of the Riverside district, where the buildings were older and the streets narrower, a few lights still glowed behind drawn curtains, tiny lighthouses in the gentle storm. You were here, walking slowly along the brick-lined sidewalk beneath an umbrella, not out of necessity, for the rain was so light it barely soaked through your coat, but out of comfort, a ritual. The umbrella muffled the rain above you, turning it into a soft drumming that pulsed like a lullaby on canvas. Each step was deliberate, unhurried. Your shoes, soft-soled and well-worn, pressed into the damp pavement with a soft crunch, barely audible over the ambient hush. The air carried the scent of wet stone, old books, and a hint of jasmine from a plant spilling over a balcony a few doors down. You passed a bakery where the lights were dim, but the ovens still purred with residual warmth. Through the glass, you could see stacks of unbaked bread wrapped in cloth, resting like sleeping children, preparing for tomorrow's rise. Ahead, a street lamp cast a soft yellow halo on the sidewalk, its light diffused by the mist. Beneath it stood a small bench, wooden and slightly weathered, sheltered beneath the overhang of a tea house. It was here you paused. The choice wasn't conscious. It felt like gravity had shifted, gently pulling you toward stillness. You lowered the umbrella, leaned it against the bench, and sat. The wood was cool beneath your palms, damp but not uncomfortable. The rain continued, and with it, the the city exhaled, long, slow content. The sound of the rain changed as you settled. It was no longer a distant tapping, but something more intimate. 1,000 tiny droplets hitting leaves, puddles, awnings, creating a seamless melody. It reminded you of a recording you once heard, labeled Urban Rain for Deep Sleep, though there was no comparison. This was real. This was breathing. The city, for all its steel and noise, could be profoundly quiet when it wanted to be. And tonight it chose silence. From somewhere nearby came the chime of a wind bell, delicate like silver threads plucked one by one. It hung from the eaves of a flower shop where the owner had left the door slightly ajar, allowing the scent of eucalyptus and dried lavender to drift into the street. A cat, gray and thick-furred, slipped through the gap, paused to blink at you, then curled at the threshold, its tail wrapping around its paws like a question mark. It watched the rain with golden eyes, unbothered. You smiled, though no one saw. And the city didn't mind. The tea house across the street released a curl of steam from its chimney, a thin ribbon twisting into the night. Inside, only 2 people remained, a barista wiping down counters and an older woman reading by the light of a kerosene lamp. The windows fogged slightly, softening the view into something dreamlike. You could see the gentle motion of steam rising from a cup placed beside her book, and the way her fingers turned each page slowly, carefully, as if afraid to wake the stories. A bicycle leaned against the railing outside, its basket filled with a folded newspaper, a woolen scarf, and a thermos. It looked like it had been there for hours, resting after a long day's journey. Beside it, a wooden planter overflowed with mint and lemon balm, their leaves glistening with droplets. The scent drifted over, mingling with the wet earth and the far-off salt of the river. You closed your eyes for a moment, letting the sound settle around you. The rain, the soft hum of the refrigerator inside the tea house, the distant chime of a tram slowing at the station 2 blocks over, its wheels squeaking faintly as they kissed wet rails. Somewhere a window opened and a voice, soft and tired, called goodnight to a neighbor. Then silence again, deeper than before. In that stillness, your breathing slowed. It matched the rhythm of the city, the gentle rise and fall like waves lapping a distant shore. You felt your shoulders drop, your jaw unclench. There was no urgency here, no messages to answer, no clocks ticking down. Just the night, the rain, and the quiet magic of being unseen, unneeded, and utterly at peace. You reached into your coat pocket and pulled out a small notebook, its cover worn from touch, softened by time. A pencil rolled out with it, and you caught it just before it could roll off the bench. You didn't open the notebook. You only held it, feeling the grain of the paper, the slight ridges of the spine. It was comforting, like holding a memory. You remembered buying it at a bookstall in autumn, the seller wrapping it in brown paper with string. You remembered writing your name on the first page in careful script, then never filling another. That was okay. Some things existed for their presence, not their purpose. You placed the notebook beside you and leaned back. Above, the trees that lined the street swayed gently, their leaves catching the mist and shimmering under the lamplight. A pigeon settled into a nook in a brick wall, fluffing its feathers against the cool. It cooed once, low and soothing, then tucked its head beneath its wing. The rain softened further. It was no longer falling, but drifting, like ash from a forgotten fire. Each drop landed with the patience of centuries. You watched a puddle beside the curb gather ripples in slow motion. A leaf spun in circles on its surface, caught in a tiny vortex, then stilled. Time in this moment was not linear. It pooled. It breathed. It waited. A light turned off in the tea house. Then another. The barista locked the door, gave a small wave to the woman inside, and stepped into the rain without an umbrella. They didn't run. They walked, hands in pockets, shoulders relaxed, disappearing around the corner with a quiet crunch of gravel. The woman stayed, reading, steam still rising from her cup, her shadow dancing on the wall. You thought of your own bed, warm with layers of linen, a down comforter, and a pillow that remembered the shape of your head. You thought of slipping under the covers, of listening to the rain through the slightly open window, of letting your body sink into the mattress like a stone into soft earth. But you weren't ready yet. The night had offered you this bench, this sound, this moment, and you wanted to accept it fully. From a second-floor apartment above a stationery shop, a piano began to play. Not loudly, not for an audience, just a single hand moving across the keys in a slow, improvised melody. It was jazz, cool and meandering, notes lingering like smoke. The window was cracked, and the music seeped through, blending with the rain, each chord softening as it touched the air. You didn't know who played. You only knew that someone, somewhere, was choosing beauty over sleep. And that was fine. The city allowed these small rebellions, these acts of quiet creation. You close your eyes again and let the music wash over you. The left hand played a simple bass line, 1, 2, 3, 4, steady and grounding. The right hand wove in and out, sometimes repeating a phrase, sometimes wandering into something new. A minor seventh here, a suspended chord there. It didn't resolve quickly. It let you wait. It made you comfortable with not knowing what came next. A door opened above you, the stationery shop, and a young man stepped out in slippers and a long sweater. He carried a steaming mug. He didn't look your way. Instead, he leaned against the railing, sipped his drink, and listened to the piano. His breath formed little clouds in the cool air. He smiled, slightly, privately, and you could tell he knew the player. Maybe it was his roommate. Maybe it was a neighbor they'd never met, but felt kinship with through sound. After a few minutes, the music stopped. There was no final flourish, just a slow release of keys, the soft click of the piano lid closing. The window slid shut, the light dimmed, and the city returned to its liquid silence. The young man stayed a moment longer. He finished his tea, placed the mug on the rail, and then turned back inside, closing the door quietly behind him. The street was empty again. You were alone with the rain, the bench, and the memory of music. And yet, you didn't feel alone. You felt woven into the night, part of something greater. The city wasn't sleeping, it was dreaming, and you were inside its dream. You stood slowly, carefully, as if not to startle the peace. The bench sighed beneath your weight as you rose, releasing warmth you hadn't realized it had absorbed. You picked up your umbrella, shaking off a few droplets that had gathered on the fabric. The handle was smooth in your hand, wood polished by time and touch. You liked the feel of it. It grounded you. You began to walk again, not toward anything in particular, but simply to move. Your steps echoed in a soft rhythm, scuff, tap, matching the slow pulse of the rain. You passed a lamppost wrapped in ivy, its tendrils dark and glistening. A snail clung to the glass, moving in imperceptible increments, leaving a faint trail like liquid silver. Half a block ahead, a small convenience store remained open, a family-run place with a glowing sign that read, Moonlight Mart. The door chimed as someone exited with a bag of groceries, nodding to the clerk inside. The clerk, a woman in her 50s with a floral apron and reading glasses, was listening to a radio. It played soft jazz, the same cool, breathy saxophone that had drifted through the district earlier. She was knitting. A ball of ivory wool rested in her lap, and needles clicked in a steady tempo, like a metronome. You stepped inside. The warmth embraced you. The floor was linoleum, slightly sticky in patches, but clean. Shelves lined the walls, tins of tea, jars of honey, boxes of oatmeal, and rows of books with faded spines. In the back, a kettle steamed on a hot plate, and the scent of chamomile and elderflower filled the air. Evening, the clerk said, not looking up. Her voice was soft, like wool over wood. Hi, you replied, just as quietly. You browsed, not for anything specific. You ran your fingers along the spines of paperbacks, mystery novels, poetry collections, dog-eared travel guides. You picked up a jar of lavender honey, unscrewed the lid just enough to catch the fragrance, floral, earthy, sweet, then returned it to the shelf. In the corner, a turntable played a vinyl record, so quietly you almost missed it. It was Bill Evans, perhaps, or Chet Baker. The notes floated like dust in sunbeams. You chose a small box of jasmine tea, wrapped in rice paper with a wax seal. You also took a packet of oatmeal cookies, homemade, according to the label. At the counter, the clerk rang it up without speaking, her needles still moving. She handed you a paper bag, thick, brown, with string handles. "Sleep well," she said. You nodded. You too. You stepped back into the rain, but the warmth of the store followed you for a few steps, wrapping around you like a blanket. You crossed the street, now more aware of the quiet luxury of movement, of walking without destination, of feeling your body in space, your breath in time. You reached a bridge, a narrow footbridge over a sluggish canal. Iron railings ran along both sides, cold to the touch, but not unpleasant. You paused in the middle, leaning against the railing, watching the water below. The rain had created 1,000 tiny craters on the surface, each one forming, dissolving, forming again. Reflections danced there, of streetlights, of windows, of stars hidden behind the clouds. A barge floated down the canal, moving at a snail's pace. Its lights glowed amber, and its engine hummed like a resting bee. On the deck, a man stood with a cup of coffee, watching the banks slip by. He wore a jacket lined with fleece and had a dog curled at his feet. The dog didn't bark. It didn't move. It simply existed, warm and still. You watched them pass. There was something deeply calming about slow movement, about things that didn't rush. The barge didn't care about schedules. It traveled at the speed of water, of patience, and the man on deck didn't seem to mind. He sipped his coffee, looked up at the rain, then back at the dark water. You stayed until they disappeared around the bend, the hum receding into the night. Then you turned and walked the rest of the way home. It wasn't far. Just a few blocks through narrow lanes where bicycles were chained to railings and laundry hung under eaves, gently swaying. A lantern hung outside an antique shop, casting a warm pool on the pavement. You passed a mailbox with a letter still sticking out, handwritten, addressed in looping script, a stamp from another country in the corner. It made you wonder who would write a letter like that, and who would wait to receive it. Your building came into view, a 3-story structure of faded brick and ivy-covered balconies. A single light burned in the lobby, casting long shadows across the tiled floor. You ascended the front steps, 3 wide, shallow ones, each creaking faintly beneath your weight. The key turned smoothly in the lock. The door side open. Inside, the air was still and slightly cool. The carpet absorbed your footsteps. You kicked off your shoes, soft thuds that barely echoed, and padded down the hall to your apartment. The door clicked shut behind you. Home. You placed the paper bag on the kitchen counter and lit a small candle, beeswax in a glass jar. It flickered to life, casting soft shadows on the walls. You filled a kettle with water and set it on the stove. It began to warm with a low, steady hum. While you waited, you changed into loose cotton pajamas, gray and soft, like clouds. You folded your coat and hung it by the door. Your socks went into the laundry basket. Quiet little thumps. The window was open a crack, and the rain misted in, freshening the air. The kettle began to whistle, a soft, rising poured the water into a ceramic mug and dropped in the tea bag. It swayed gently as the water darkened to golden. You set the mug on the windowsill and let it steep, watching steam curl upward like a question mark. You sat on the edge of your bed, pulling back the covers. The sheets were cool and smooth, linen slightly wrinkled, smelling faintly of lavender from the last wash. You slipped in, one leg at a time, then pulled the comforter up to your chest. A long, slow exhale escaped you. Your body sank, relaxed, releasing the day's weight. Outside, the rain continued. The city breathed, and you, lying beneath layers of warmth, listened. You sipped the tea. It was hot but not scalding, fragrant and delicate. With each sip, your thoughts loosened, untangled. The images of the night floated through your mind. The bench, the piano, the barge, the snail on the lamp, the knitting clerk. You set the mug aside and turned out the light. Only the candle remained, glowing softly in the corner. You watched its flame, steady, gentle, alive. It cast flickering patterns on the ceiling, shadows that looked like trees, like water, like slow dancing figures. You closed your eyes. The rain tapped on the window pane, soft, consistent, comforting. It was not loud enough to disturb, but present enough to lull. Somewhere down the street, a door closed, a bicycle chain rattled, a child giggled in a dream, a dog sighed in sleep. Your breathing deepened. You thought of tomorrow, not with worry, but with quiet anticipation. Perhaps you would visit the tea house. Perhaps you would buy a book from the stationery shop. Perhaps you would sit on the bench again, just to listen, but not now. Now was for rest. The candle burned low. Its flame wavered, then dimmed, then disappeared with a wisp of smoke. The room darkened completely, except for the faint glow of the street lamp outside, painting a soft rectangle on the floor. You turned onto your side, curling slightly, one arm beneath the pillow. The city hummed its lullaby, the low thrum of distant heaters, the creak of old pipes, the whisper of wind through eaves. Somewhere a faucet dripped, once, twice, then stopped. A clock ticked in the living room. 1, 2, 3. You drifted, and as you did, the rain slowed even more, each droplet stretching time, suspending it. The world softened at the edges, the boundaries between inside and outside, self and city, dream and reality, blurred. You were no longer walking the streets. The streets were walking through you. The sound of tires on wet asphalt became the rhythm of your heart. The chime of the wind bell became your breath. The piano's lingering chords became your thoughts, dissolving into silence. You were not falling asleep. You were being carried. You woke briefly to the sound of a cat meowing far below. It was not urgent. It was not lonely. It was simply announcing its presence, like a poet reading to an empty room. You smiled in the dark, then you let go again. Hours passed, or minutes. It didn't matter. When you opened your eyes next, the rain had stopped. The sky outside was no longer black, but deep indigo, edged with the first hints of gray. Dawn was coming, but gently, like a guest who didn't want to disturb. You didn't move. You watched the light change, slow, imperceptible shifts. The street lamp flickered off. A bird chirped, once, then another. Somewhere a window opened, a yawn, footsteps in slippers, but the quiet remained. You reached for the mug on the windowsill. The tea was cold, but you didn't mind. You held it anyway, feeling the smooth ceramic, the faint warmth it still retained. You fell back asleep. You dreamed. In your dream, you walked again through the rainy streets, but this time everything was slightly brighter, slightly slower. The puddles reflected not just light, but memories. The sound of your mother humming in the kitchen, the feel of sand between your toes as a child, the smell of library books on a winter afternoon. You passed the bench, but it was empty. The tea house was closed, but the piano played again, this time from inside your chest. It was your heartbeat transformed into melody, and as you walked, the city rearranged itself around you. Buildings softened into hills, streets became streams, lampposts bloomed into trees. You didn't question it. You only listened, and in the dream, the rain never fell. It hovered, thousands of droplets suspended in the air, catching the light, turning the world into a prism. You reached out, touched one. It burst into scent, jasmine, honey, old paper, wet stone. Then you woke. Morning had arrived. Sunlight pooled on the floor, warm and golden. The window was still open, and a breeze carried in the sound of bicycles, distant laughter, and the clink of dishes from the cafe across the street. You stretched, slowly, luxuriously, every muscle uncoiling like a spring returning to rest. You got up, padded to the kitchen, and brewed a new pot of tea. Chamomile this time. You added a spoon of lavender honey from the jar you'd bought the night before. You carried the mug to the window and stood there, watching the city wake. People emerged, joggers in neon sneakers, baristas unlocking doors, students with backpacks slung over one shoulder. A delivery van rolled past, its engine a gentle purr. A man walked his dog, a small, scruffy creature that stopped to sniff every lamp post, and yet, even in waking, the calm remained. The night had not been broken. It had simply folded into the day. You sipped your tea. You smiled, and for a long time, you just stood there, still, peaceful, full of quiet. In the hours that followed, the city wore its dampness like a second skin. Puddles lingered in hollows of pavement, mirrors reflecting the awakening sky. Sunlight, still pale and hesitant, touched rooftops and fire escapes, drawing steam from stone and brick. The air smelled clean, washed, renewed. You went downstairs, slippers quiet on the stairs, and stepped outside. The street was alive, but not loud. A postman sorted letters on his route, whistling a tune without melody. A woman watered geraniums in a balcony box, the droplets sparkling as they fell. A bus rolled past, its doors sighing open and shut. You walked to the bakery, the one you'd passed last night. The ovens were now roaring, and loaves of sourdough emerged, crackling slightly as they cooled. The baker, flour in his hair, sleeves rolled to the elbows, handed you a warm roll wrapped in paper. "A no charge," he said, "left over from the rise." You thanked him and walked on, nibbling the edge of the bread. It was crusty, tangy, perfect. At the corner, the tea house opened its doors. The barista from last night was arranging cushions by the window. The older woman returned, this time with a sketchbook. She sat where she had the night before, sipping from a fresh cup. You didn't go in. You only watched from a distance. And then, before heading home again, you paused at the bench beneath the lamplight. It was dry now, but you could still feel the memory of the night, the rain, the silence, the music, the stillness. You sat, closed your eyes, and listened, not to sound, but to peace. And in that moment, you knew this was not just a night. It was a language, a way of being, and you could return to it any time. All you had to do was be still. All you had to do was listen. All you had to do was breathe. And so you did. And so you slept, awake, and so the city held you. And so the dream never really ended. It only changed form, like rain, like steam, like breath, like sleep, and you, nestled in the quiet heart of the world, were exactly where you needed to be. And now the rain begins to fade. The city sleeps, and you sleep with it, a gentle breath among 1,000 others. The streets are empty, but they remember your footsteps. The windows still glow softly, keeping watch as you drift deeper into your dreams. If your eyes are still open, let them grow heavy. If your mind is still awake, let it rest in the sound of distant rain. You have walked through the night and found peace waiting quietly for you. You don't need to chase it. It's already here, inside your breath, inside your stillness. As the story fades, let go of everything that remains. Sleep is not the end of the story. It's simply another beginning. Good night, my friend. May your dreams be gentle and your night endlessly calm.